Joined now by Matt Norlander, senior writer for CBS Sports, who recently wrote about Michael Jordan. What's up, Matt?
Hey, good morning. How we doing?
Thanks for joining us.
An interesting point in your article that Jordan's one of these guys that can be the hero and the villain at the same time.
Yeah. You want me to lay that out for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no other player, current or past, and I don't, or in the future that I think will be able to do this. Jordan had the ability where even if you hated him, you couldn't help but watch him. I live up in Connecticut, so I obviously have a number of friends who are New York Knicks fans, and even they, while they, couldn't stand to have to face the Bulls and Jordan, and hope beyond hope that they could somehow beat him and win, and that never happened when Jordan was on the team. They still can't help but love to watch him play. He is irresistible. And I thought that the past two episodes that aired on Sunday night kind of sneakily showed that once more where, I wrote a column at CBSSports.com about this, and I kind of lead that column off about Jordan, where the Gary Payton reaction clip was probably the most entertaining clip we've seen and probably will see. Maybe 9 or 10 will offer up something even better, but what was so telling to me about this is, he's handed the tablet yet again to watch an interview that was held recently by one of the documentary subjects. In this case, it's Payton, and he just lets out this huge cackle belly laugh, and then his eyes kind of bug out when Payton's saying, "If I'd guarded him the whole time, things would have been different." And it's almost like, as all this is happening, right, the collective sports fan that's watching this is getting, an absolute kick out of it because they love Jordan clowning on people in this way, the way that he did on the court. But he's pulled a magnificent trick here because if you go back and look, Michael Jordan's worst finals, without debate, by far, and almost ironically, were the 96 finals. That was the best Bulls team ever, but that was Jordan's worst final statistically, easily. In fact, he averaged fewer than 24 points when Payton was guarding him during those games. So Gary Payton actually has a really good case that when he was guarding MJ, things changed and they were different, and that is true. But because of the influence and sway of Michael Jordan, even when he's acting like a cackling jerk, our instinct is not to believe Gary Payton. It's to say, yeah, look how amazing this is. Jordan is just absolutely trashing this guy and disposing of him by laughing at him twice and then saying, "I had no problem with the glove." And we are so swayed by it. There is not another athlete ever that has been as loved, and I won't even say hated, but just could bring in the sports fan no matter what you felt about him, and he came out winning every single time. It's not there. You can make real quick. You can make the case that LeBron James has just a massive fan base, and people push back on him, and there's all this completely ankle deep shallow BS that's brought up about him. But there's still plenty of people who genuinely just have an antagonism toward LeBron, and that's just never been the case with Jordan. Fair or not, that's just how it is.
Matt, with you being a Connecticut guy, does it hurt you in your soul that Scotty Burrell was a guy that Jordan just went in on relentlessly? Does it hurt you?
No. So my parents grew up in Chicago, and I grew up in Vermont. So I grew up a Bulls fan. First of all, I was a Walter Payton, Michael Jordan, brainwashed from the age of 3, thankfully, with all of this. And so then I moved to Connecticut the day before my senior year of high school out of Vermont. So I'm not a UConn fan. My wife actually is an alumnus of the university. But there was no I have no particular connection to Scotty Burrell or UConn or anything like that. I actually thought it was pretty interesting. And actually have had dinner with Scotty Burrell before, and didn't actually at the time when we did that, didn't even think to ask him about his days with the Bulls. But I think fortunately for Scott, he comes out looking even better than maybe we would have anticipated from episodes earlier in the doc. And Jordan's just like, I was trying to ride this guy because I might need him, and he's just too nice, man. He's just way too nice of a guy, and that definitely wound up being true there. But it's been fascinating. It certainly has. Just this documentary has gotten a lot of praise, plenty of criticism for what it isn't, but I didn't expect it to be, something on the level of the OJ documentary that came out a few years ago. I just didn't think it would be that. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, being someone who was just, a huge Bulls fan growing up. It's been great to go back and see all this. I did one quick follow on that, though. Maybe episodes 9 and 10 will give us some more. I have felt that we haven't had quite enough true, like, behind the scenes, like, this is what was captured on camera in real time. Like, we've gotten some, but there hasn't been quite enough, like, cameras were with the team in 97, 98, and here's all the good stuff it captured. That just, to me, has fallen a little bit short of expectation.
I just think it's riveting television, Matt. I really do. I wasn't necessarily a Bulls fan. I was just a Jordan fan. So I guess I was a Bulls fan. I was always rooting for their teams. But once he left, I didn't care about him. But just the behind-the-scenes footage, just all the old footage of 90s basketball, man, you just realize how much you miss it because those rivalries, you'll never have those rivalries again. It's not even close to what it is today. And just kind of the brand of basketball, right, and the personalities. What was your thought on the end of episode 8 when he starts talking about the cost of, driving these guys to want to win like him and really pushing them, and he talked about the fight with Kerr, and then he starts to get emotional at the very end. What was your take on that?
Yeah, no, that was when he was talking about when he was getting emotional at the end of episode 7, they actually did a pretty sweet thing where they tied the end of episode 7 and 8. They were both emotional endings. The end of episode 8 was when we saw a video of him, again, crying on the floor after winning the 96 title. But that was, surprising video in that, like, you actually heard him sobbing. Right. And while that video has been played over the years, the audio has never maybe it's been played, but I noticed this amongst a lot of people. Like, no one can ever recall ever hearing it. But the stuff at the end of episode 7 really was cutting into, I think, why it's just amazing the psyche of Jordan and how so many people identify with it at the same time being unable to actually live that out. And that's probably for the better, by the way, because, Jordan, again, he can pull off being the hero and the villain. You can easily see why he was not a good guy to be around in so many facets there. If you lived your life like Michael Jordan, you wouldn't have any friends. You might have you would have the respect as much as you would have the fear of maybe your contemporaries there. But because of that, there's just this interesting pull with, and maybe it's special to sports because you can do it in the arena and in the field of competition, and when you do that, it brings people in more, and they can kind of latch themselves on to your philosophies, if you will. Yeah. But the way that he was getting emotional and describing why he did what he did, who he was, how much he cared, I thought it was absolutely on the money when he said, I never asked anything of my teammates that I didn't do it myself. I think that is so very true. And with all of that, I wish he wouldn't have said break. I wish that he had actually been able to, even if he was losing his composure a bit, gone on a little bit more. I actually wanted a little more from Jordan in kind of laying out how much it meant to him and kind of continuing there. So it was a great moment and a great spot to cut the end of the episode. There's no doubt about it. But I actually was like, no, if this is a behind the scenes, like you're giving us this, don't say break, like continue with this, like keep fighting through it the way you win the game, keep going. So it was an awesome moment, but I wanted a little more.
It's almost like when he reflects back on it, as you get older and wiser, you start feeling differently about other relationships you had or fractured relationships. It's almost like he feels bad the way he treated those guys. Or am I looking at it a different way?
In some ways, I think that is true. In other ways, not, because he looks at everything that's happened since that all finished. And in the end, for him, it was probably, no doubt about it, worth it. I think that's clear. But, yes, there could be, there's so much to interpret from what he was saying and what he could have been feeling as he was wrapping up that particular part of the interview at the end of episode 7 there. But it's been – the entire doc has just been it's been an interesting, obviously, walk down memory lane. It's so funny that you mentioned that, like, you weren't a Bulls fan, you were a Jordan fan, and then when he left, that was kind of it. Well, you speak for 40% of the NBA audience. When Michael left the Bulls and retired again for a second time, interest in the league, I won't say plummeted, but the ratings, like, easily show how much he carried the league was absurd. And even now, this is a cultural event. When we get 2, 4, 8 years down the road, and we are clear of this, just brutal pandemic situation, I think we will, in some ways, look back on, you remember those 5 weeks in April and May of 2020 when, COVID-19 was, and we all gathered around our televisions, talking as if it was like 1982 when people actually used to do that. They would gather around their television. But this has become the defining sports event in a time when there are no other sports. Michael Jordan is yet again carrying the NBA, carrying the interest of it, and it's been very fascinating to see. And I will say, and I feel this way now, and I'm going to feel it even more when we get to Sunday night. Amazingly enough, 10 episodes is not enough.
I agree. Yeah.
20 truthfully would have been too many, but you could have gotten 12 episodes. I mean, they have barely touched on, you could do a whole episode on the shoes, and we got 7 minutes on Jordan's shoes. Yeah. You could do a whole episode on the Olympics in general, and that was dedicated to about 25 minutes of an episode. So there's just parts here and there where they didn't really dive into it, but it's been awesome nonetheless, and has really helped, I think, a younger generation understand more of what the NBA was about in the 80s and the 90s, and given more of an appreciation for truly how big Michael Jordan was. One of the 3 or 4 most famous people on the planet at that point.
Yeah.
And at this point, it's almost the same. I mean, he's easily in the top 10, and for him to be, and he's not on television. The fact that we're seeing him now, he almost never does interviews, and that's still the case there. It really is something.
Yeah, he was so media friendly back then, but you never hear from him now. It's kind of strange.
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't need to. That's the thing. Is he sacrificed, and we saw this in episode 5, I think it was.
Yeah.
When he was on the couch and talking about how he couldn't. He was done with it. He was available to the media as part of the gig, and then now he's a team owner, and he's a billionaire, and he just doesn't need to be. So it's not surprising to me, but after having lived the life he lives in now, the fact that it's probably a little bit easier for him now than it would have been in 94, 98, 2005. But and when you've been in the spotlight for so long and you become one of the most famous people in the history of the planet, then yeah, it's completely understandable when you might want to just say, you know what, I'm going to try and live my life as best I can outside of the spotlight. He's not a recluse. He's a part owner of a team, and he's seen in the skybox here and there occasionally and stuff like that. But it is interesting nonetheless.
Just from a sports writer's perspective, when they talked about his retirement and they insinuate, a lot of sports writers insinuated, almost accused him of leaving because David Stern suspended him for 18 months because of the gambling. Right? And they put that out there. Can you imagine, now everything has changed in 25 years, but can you imagine doing that as a sports writer now if, let's just say, LeBron, retired or someone else retired and you just started accusing him of certain things? I mean, would your bosses even allow you to write that stuff without the evidence? I couldn't believe that.
No, and I mean, listen, I won't impugn the entire profession because that's clearly unfair, but you probably just had a few people here and there that did it, and the legend of it grows larger than maybe it actually was there. But it goes to show where some people might lament on the state of sports writing today. Maybe not so much has changed in the past 25, 30 years there. And that's, again, to remind people that, 80 to 90% of the people in the profession do it the right way, do it responsibly.
Sure.
Sometimes there can be elements to a story that because of the way that it might be presented or written about with one person, it gets amplified in such a way where it kind of goes crazy. But I'm glad that they addressed that stuff, and the whole thing makes zero sense. It always has to me. If you're David Stern and remember what David Stern's reputation was, and you have a global icon, you're really going to go to him and say, all right, Michael, here's the plan. All right. I'm going to suspend you. I'm going to suspend you for 18 months. That way, if you want, you can randomly come back in March of 1995.
It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I mean, those guys all those writers should have been fired immediately for writing that.
Yeah, it just was it was idiotic, but at the time, Jordan had been this kind of Teflon guy, and then when you had all of the things connected to his gambling, and with all of that, it was like, oh, what, might we have a scandal here? And sometimes, yes, again, the beast almost feeds itself, but I don't disagree with you.